In 1997, a small island vanished from the Pacific Ocean, swallowed by a force that can only be described as unnatural. Officially, it was labeled a massive weather event, but the truth? It took more than just the island. 4 meteorologists and a pilot went with it. Their bodies, of course, were never recovered. This might not sound familiar to you, and that's because, officially, it never happened. At least, that's what the US government claims. I should know. I was working for them in '97. Back then, I was a younger man, lured by the thrill of storm chasing. So when they offered to fund my passion, I jumped at the chance, never questioning what I was getting myself into. I imagined danger, deadly storms, the kind that would make headlines. But instead, I spent most of my time behind a computer, watching blips on a radar screen, reporting my findings like some glorified secretary. I wasn't the one who discovered the island. It appeared one day, a nameless, uninhabited speck on my radar. A routine assignment. My orders were simple: keep an eye on it. Weeks passed and nothing happened. No storms, no unusual patterns, just silence. I couldn't understand why I was monitoring a dead spot in the middle of nowhere. Then it started. Subtle at first changes in pressure, wind speeds, but nothing alarming. It looked like a storm was brewing. A hurricane, maybe. But something was wrong. This storm wasn't forming over the water. No, it was rising. From the island itself. My radar tracked the growing storm, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. Something unnatural. I logged everything, of course. Every gust, every shift. Then one day, a memo crossed my desk. We weren't alone in this anymore. A team of 4 meteorologists was being sent to the island, along with a pilot. Their mission? To collect data, take samples, figure out what was happening out there. We were told to assist them remotely, analyze the data they sent back. I should have felt relief, maybe even excitement. After all, I was getting a raise. But something didn't sit right. In the days leading up to their departure, the storm on the island grew fiercer, more erratic. Our team, quietly whispering among ourselves, started to worry. Some suggested calling off the mission, but the higher-ups were adamant. The research, they said, was too important to delay. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something was deeply wrong. The final meeting with my boss confirmed it. In his eyes, I saw something I'd never expected: fear. The meteorologists boarded a small plane, heading straight for the island. None of them came back. The meteorologists were flown to the island via a small plane. We, the team back at base, weren't given their names, just identifiers: O, B, C, D, and PP for the pilot. It was also clinical. We were to track their progress and findings, but the details were kept from us. Codes were used for everything: cryptic, disjointed fragments of research, high levels of clinic in the air, traces of beta in the soil. It was like piecing together a puzzle we weren't meant to solve. We were just the middlemen handing off their cryptic messages to our supervisors, who always seemed to know more than they let on. The only person we had direct contact with was P, the pilot, who had a radio in the plane. But even that connection was rare. For the first week, everything seemed normal, or as normal as it could be under the circumstances. The team sent back data on the weather: heavy rain, high winds, hailstorms. The storm that had formed over the island seemed to be escalating, but nothing alarming. Then came the second week. The meteorologists stopped sending reports. At first, we thought it was a technical glitch. But as the hours turned to days and our attempts to contact them were met with silence, the tension grew. Even our superiors, usually calm, collected, started to panic. They came into our office more frequently, pacing, demanding updates we couldn't give. For an entire week, we heard nothing. Until, out of nowhere, a single transmission broke the silence. 3 words: "C is dead." That was it. Nothing more. The room was thrown into chaos. High-ranking officials swarmed in, dissecting those 3 words like they held the key to some unspeakable truth. We, just the weather team, stood back, watching, as if we were no longer part of the operation. We had become spectators to something far darker than we had ever imagined. Then another message, cold, emotionless. "We'll continue the mission as planned." The words felt like they had come from the void itself, detached, hollow. The island had gotten to them. We knew it, but we kept silent, pretending not to feel the creeping dread that settled over us like a suffocating fog. The next day, half the team didn't show up. I couldn't blame them. I didn't want to be there either. I felt trapped, as though we were being pulled into something we couldn't escape. Something that was unraveling right in front of us. The meteorologists started transmitting again, their strange coded messages coming in as if nothing had happened. It was unnerving how quickly things went back to normal. But then, just as the tension began to ease, it happened again. We were packing up for the day, about to leave the office, when the radio crackled to life. Another transmission. This one, different, desperate. "Lost A and D, unlikely they will return. Cannot continue with search. Investigation shows positive. For God's sake, send help. Evacuation needed. Release us from this hell." The room fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The storm on that island had claimed them, just as it had claimed everything else. We were speechless. It was more than any of us could handle. Some left the room to fetch our supervisors. Others stepped outside for air. A few never came back. We were weather experts, not soldiers. Loss wasn't something we were trained for. The message had hit us like a punch to the gut. People crowded into our cramped room, peering at the computer screens. But when I looked at my boss, I saw no shock, just a deep, cold regret. The transmissions went silent after that. For the team, it was almost a relief. We were terrified of what the next message might say. The silence felt like a blessing. Only a few of us were left now, and our small computer room had transformed into a portal to something far beyond our comprehension. Outside, the storm continued to rage, growing more violent, more unnatural by the day. We watched in horror as it expanded grotesquely on our screens, a living nightmare, twisting itself into something monstrous. It was the following Tuesday when we received our final message from the island. 5 days had passed with nothing but the occasional garbled letters and numbers that meant nothing. Then the radio crackled to life, and we all jumped in our seats. The pilot's radio. His labored breathing filtered through layers of static, heavy, and strained. I quickly adjusted the frequency, trying to clear the signal. And then a voice broke through. A woman's voice, sharp, panicked. It wasn't the pilot. I leaned in, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know what I've done is treason," she gasped, her words frantic, muffled under the roar of the storm. "If you're reading this, please let me return. You don't understand the horror here. Please, let me come back." Her voice cracked, pleading, as the storm howled in the background. We sat frozen, hands over our mouths, unsure of how to respond. The supervisors didn't rush in this time, no one did. It was just us, alone in that room, with the sound of her desperate cries echoing through the radio. For 5 minutes, she repeated her prayers, her pleas, over and over again. And then, something shifted. Her voice filled with a terror that made my skin crawl rose into a high-pitched shriek. She screamed, a sound that pierced through the static like a blade, and then nothing. The transmission cut off. Silence. On our screens, the storm swallowed the island whole. The radar showed it spreading, doubling in size and speed, obliterating everything in its path. The team rushed out of the room, some crying, others in stunned silence. But I stayed. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I watched, transfixed, as the storm seemed to tear itself apart, fragments breaking off and dissipating into the ocean. When it was over, I refreshed my screen, certain I had experienced some kind of malfunction. But no, what I saw was real. The island was gone. The next day, I was offered a large severance package. They thanked me for my help on the project. I took the money and never went back to storm chasing. Now, even the sound of rain hitting my windows at night sends a shiver down my spine. It reminds me of those twisting, swirling colors on the radar screen that still haunt my nightmares. I'll never know what was on that island, and I'm fine with that. I don't think I want to know.